Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone who is viewing this program tonight and our panel discussion on faith and politics, which is being hosted by Religions United Committee of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches. We have three very distinguished guests tonight. I'd like to thank all of them for being here, and I will introduce them so that we can get right into the topics here. First is Representative John Talley, who is from Anadarko, Oklahoma. It was there that he discovered his passion for agriculture and hard work through FFA and the sport of wrestling. After graduating from high school in '73, John enrolled at Oklahoma State University, where he lettered in wrestling and earned a bachelor's degree in agriculture education. And it was there where he was lucky, I guess, or she was lucky. To meet Carly. You okay? Good. He is that is in House District 33, where he has lived for more than 40 years in that area. As a representative for District 33, in which he was elected in 2019, Representative Talley often draws from his diverse background when making decisions at the state capitol. Coming from a family of educators, he understands the importance of supporting schools in their crucial work of investing in Oklahoma's kids. In 1978, John became an ordained minister and has worked with young adults ever since. Of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes of North Central Oklahoma, where his focus of his ministry is with student athletes and coaches across District 33, as well as students at Oklahoma State University. One of his popular messages is, quote, "Focus on the positive to fight the negative." With that focus, he says, you change not only your outlook about yourself, but also your outlook about others. Representative Talley has served as the police chaplain with the Stillwater Police Department and currently serves as the chaplain for the Oklahoma State football team. As a Representative Talley believes that his first job is to listen to his constituents about the hopes and needs of every community in District 33. And just if you have an idea of what District 33 is, it goes from Cushing to Coyle, Yale to Ripley, and Stillwater to Perkins. And something that he believes in very strongly is that rural Oklahomans are a hardworking group, trustworthy and giving people, and he's proud to represent rural Payne County. So thank you for being with us here tonight, Representative Talley. Our next panelist is Representative Mauree Turner, who is from Ardmore, Oklahoma. She was raised in an interfaith Baptist and Muslim family. She describes herself as a politician and a community organizer. She was elected to the House of Representatives in 2020 and represents District 88. She previously served as a board member of the Council of American Islamic Relations and led the criminal justice reform initiatives with the American Civil Liberties programs. She is a graduate of Ardmore High School and attended Oklahoma State University. Thank you, Representative Turner, for being with us tonight. And finally is our senator for the panel, which is Senator George Young, who was born in Memphis, Tennessee. After 30 years, he retired from the pastoral service in 2013. Dr. Young was elected to the Oklahoma State House of Representatives in 2014. While serving, was elected as the Democratic Caucus Vice Chair and serves as the Oklahoma Legislative Black Caucus Chair. As of November 6, 2018, he was elected to the Oklahoma State Senate, where he represents District 48, and he will continue to serve as the chair of the Oklahoma Legislative Black Caucus. Dr. Young is the author of the book Christology, A Look at Practical Christianity. He was selected to attend the Center for Advanced Leadership Skills in Little Rock, Arkansas, sponsored by the Southern Legislative Conference. He was invited to attend the Medicaid Leadership Policy Academy in Washington, D.C., and the follow-up Advanced Academy sponsored by the Council of State Governments. In 2017, he participated in the Early Learning Fellowship Program sponsored by the National Conference of State Legislators. which focused on topics involving the economic returns on investment in the early years, the science of the early brain development and early childhood development. In 2018, Early Learning Fellow program sponsored by the National Conference of State Legislatures focused on the promising approach for the American addiction crisis. In 2019, Dr. Young was invited to serve on the National Task Force on Healthy States sponsored by the Council of State Governments. He is a certified mediation specialist in family and divorce issues. He received his undergraduate degree from Lambeth University in Jackson, Tennessee. He continued his education receiving a Master's of Arts in Ministry from Oklahoma Christian University, graduating magna cum laude, and a Master of Divinity degree from Phillips Theological Seminary in Tulsa. Graduating cum laude, he also received a Master of Business Administration from Oklahoma Christian University in December of 2006, and completed his Doctorate of Ministry from Phillips Theological Seminary in 2010. He is one of those people that we called Dr. Representative Pastor. And also, he continues as an adjunct professor for Phillips Theological Seminary in Tulsa. And as a pastor, he initiated a partnership that sponsors the largest back-to-school block party and school supply giveaway in the Northeast quadrant of Oklahoma City. Senator Young, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Okay, so to get started, first thing I would like to throw a question out, if everyone can unmute yourselves. I am going to go to Representative Turner first, and then follow with Representative Turner, and I promoted you already, then to Representative Talley, and then to Senator Young. And the first question is, what are your hopes and your fears for your family, for the communities you serve, and for the country as a whole?
That's a good question, and I think it looks very different for all of those, and also very similar in some aspects, for me anyway, right? In a lot of different ways, right? When I thought about running for office, and the thought of being the first Muslim elected to the Oklahoma legislature is really kind of daunting, right? It's amazing to make history, but you have to think about a lot of things in a critical way that a lot of people haven't before. And so making sure that my family was cared for and was protected during that time was very, very important to me. It's continuously very important to me, but looks a lot different when you're on the campaign trail. But my family, I think of House District 88 and Oklahomans as a whole as an extension of my family. I think I'm a good community organizer because that's how I learned to community organize, continuously thinking about community in the way that you would think about your family, right? And I really appreciate this question because that was the number one thing, right? Whenever we make calls into the district, that's the number one thing we ask is like, what are our community's hopes and concerns for Oklahoma and for the nation as a whole, right? And for a lot of us, it's making sure that we have access to the needs, to the basic essentials of everyday life, right? And that's one of my biggest concerns is making sure that my community is cared for, right? That we don't have to scrape by to survive, right? And I wonder what that looks like from inside the legislature, from working around it for the past 3-4 years, and now being a part of it. There are a lot of hopes and concerns. I see us moving forward in a really kind of powerful way, not just in House District 88, but across the nation. And the hope is that the rest of the world kind of follows suit too, right? Because it's not just about making laws at the beginning and at the end of the day, right? But it is about making sure that you are thinking about the most vulnerable community members and making sure that everybody has a seat at that table, and everybody crosses that finish line of liberation with us, right? So that's my hope, right? And my concern, right? So thank you. Thank you so much for that question.
Absolutely. Representative Talley?
Wow. Thank you for the question. Let me say it like this. Well, I do a lot of team building activities across the United States. And one of the games we play, we call the carpet game. And so everybody's on a piece of carpet in a big circle. And you start out by saying, what's your first name and something you like? And if you like whatever that person says, you move. And it's surprising how many people move. And it goes everything from food to sports to, and the next question is, say your full name, which most boys don't want to say, and something you don't like. And so people move. Okay. And then the last question is I usually ask, and this is for high school football teams to corporations. I've done, which is funny, computer corporations, and I'm terrible at working on a computer. The last question is, say your name, full name, or a nickname, and how would you end this sentence? I wish I never. And then you start getting answers, and people start moving. And I right out here in our house, right outside, we average about 3,000 kids a year when it's not COVID. One high school football player said, I wish I wasn't drinking so much. And like 10 high school football players moved. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I almost died 3 years ago. My colon exploded, and so I went septic, and I went in the hospital, stayed 75 days. One morning, my wife said I was smiling, and I was on morphine, trying to stay alive. I'd lost 40 pounds. And she said, what are you smiling about? And I said, I just had a dream that everybody on earth was playing the carpet game. And we were playing it at the equator, and nobody said, I don't want to play anymore because someone's tall or short or black or white or Muslim or Christian. Nobody said anything. They just played the game. And so what I don't like is the division that we have right now in America, which I think hurts the families. And most of the time it's because we're afraid of each other. We're afraid to go talk to someone. And so I know Tim McGraw and Tyler Hubbard. I listen to country music, and they came out with a song a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and it's called Undivided. And I don't know, you ought to listen to it. He says, why does everything have to be black or white? Why does it, if I don't go to church, I'm going to hell? Or why do I have to look right or left? If I'm just looking up to God, why isn't that enough? And so my fear is that I wish we would listen to each other more and get to know each other. I didn't know that about Senator Young. I mean, I always have respected him, but I had no idea what an awesome guy he is. And I didn't know that Representative Turner was from Ardmore. I have tons of cousins down there. And so just coming on this show, I've learned about two people that I'm around that I want to get to know more.
Very nice. Have you recovered completely from the situation?
Yes, sir. I had that surgery, and I had a waste bag on my side for like 5 months, and then they redid the surgery, hooked me back up. Then I had 2 surgeries for hernias. And while I was really sick, throwing up, I ruined all my teeth. So they had to, I got really nice, expensive teeth out of the deal. But let me tell you, that's not the way to do it.
That's not the way I want it to happen to me, Representative Talley. Well, we're glad that you're healthy again. Senator Young, you're up.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm going to take the mic away from you and Representative Talley in a minute. So, listen, your question was about hopes and fears for my family, for my constituents, and for the world. And I'll start off with a statement I make quite often. It comes out of our Declaration of Independence, and everyone's familiar with that line, but I say it quite often because I think it's the beginning for me of almost everything. It's in the second paragraph. Simply says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and parenthetically women are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That was a lie when they wrote it. So my hope for this country, for us, for my children, my grandchildren, is that we would make that the truth. My fear is that we would be where we are right now, still wrestling with that statement that was a lie then, that we've made some progress on, but we have not made it. I don't think we've gotten to the point in these many years since 1776 to now to make that statement even more pronounced in the life of this country. And so I could wrap up my hopes and fears in that one thing. In my life I've lived, I'm old enough, and obviously Representative Talley is old enough to remember also. I remember that I was born in the civil rights movement. I was brought up Memphis, Tennessee, a southern town, King Cotton, Mississippi River, all of that. And so I can remember the signs of colored only had just been taken down when I got old enough to be able to read. And I was not a slow reader. I learned to read real quickly, but the signs had just come down. And so that to me, that's the hope I have for this country. And those hopes have been dashed, like I said, because the fear is what's going on right now. If you want to look at some things recently, what happened in Newkirk, Oklahoma with John Marshall High School there, and the incident that happened there, the incident that happened in Norman, Oklahoma with the girls basketball team, the incident on the House floor when one of the representatives say he had a slip of the tongue, but those kinds of things, the incident that happened in Edmond, Oklahoma with the young African-American male who wore the t-shirt and the teacher engaged him in a way that it brought all the rest of the students in against this young man. That's my fears are, and if we really want to see those fears take, I had stopped looking at CNN. I looked at it tonight for a little while, and all of the talk is about what happened in Colorado. These shootings, they are beginning to impact, not beginning, they've already had, they are continuing to impact our very psyche as a people. And if you can tell me it's not affecting you, then I'm thinking something is wrong with you. It is affecting all of us, the strongest of us. And so my hopes and fears are tied into the development and the movement of this country and the people of this country to a place where we can take those statements that we started this country on, which were lies. They were lies then, they're still lies now, we're just making them better, and make those statements true. And we hadn't even got to the Bible, so we'll get to that a little later.
Thank you, Senator Young. In reference to the comment that you made about the shootings on another channel that I was watching, they were interviewing people in Colorado about the incident, and somebody said, "I'm just afraid that this is becoming the new normal." And unfortunately, it's two incidents in 1 week where we had these mass killings, one in Atlanta, Georgia, and one in Boulder, Colorado. So hopefully we can explore some of those issues tonight and how faith comes into that. The second question I would throw out is, how do you describe your faith background, and what values or principles guide you in your daily life and in your civic service? Let's start the other way now. Senator Young?
Thank you. Well, I can quickly answer that question. It was my mother and father. I had a mother and father my whole adult life. And my father died when I was well into my 30s, and my mother died only less than 15 years ago. And so I had a mother and father who was at home. My mother worked as a domestic a short period of time. And so every evening I came home from school, my mother was there. My father's a stonemason, and came home every evening. I said it because that's a big deal now. He came home every evening. And the other part you may not know, he had 9 children. So it was not an easy thing for him. I would, at this point in my life, I only have 2 children, and they're grown now, but there was some times I didn't want to come home then, and still didn't do a good job. He had 9. And so they instilled in me this idea this thought, this, and again, it comes from their faith life. Because you're talking about African Americans in their 60s, in the 50s and 60s who had children and were trying to teach those children in the midst of this dangerous world for them to be strong, to be resilient, to be children that would grow up and to believe that you could accomplish great things in life. None of us, I was next to the babies. So, we had worn them out by the time I got there. I still got whooping. So, they wasn't that worn off. But that's where my strength comes from. That's where my faith comes from. I pray every day, morning and night. I thank God for my mother and father and what they instilled in me that still guides me to this day. I think they wanted a lot of things from me, but what they gave me was this ability, this feeling, this faith that, again, God would help me, God would be with me, but that I had the ability to make some things happen and that nothing could stop that except me. And so when I think about how I am today, right now, it goes back to my mother and father. There's no doubt about that. And again, I'm next to the baby. I was the 8th child. And I think if you went to one of our family reunions, all of my siblings are alive except one, that you'd hear the same argument that I'm giving you now, that they would say the same thing, that it was mama and dad. We don't know how come my mama got a GED after I was like a teenager. My father, we argue now that he, from the 4th to the 8th grade, we don't know, but that's where he finished. And I wish I had time to go down the list of my brothers and sisters and their accomplishments. And you would say, man, how could these two people produce this group of folk? Because Brother Talley, you were talking about my background. You ought to hear something about some of my brothers and sisters' background. They make me look like the baby. So, that's what it is. But that's where my faith, my hope, my trust, and who I am comes out of.
Senator Young, were you raised in a religious family?
Very much so. My father was a deacon. I can take you to Memphis and show you the Magnolia Baptist Church, where he was a stonemason, the stone on the outside that he built. We went to church, and my mother was on what they call a deaconess board, which was the counterpart to the deacons, and very active. I remember many Sunday when the pastor would come to our house and we get run out, and I try to listen to the conversations from around the corner. They were very active. My mother and father, I saw my mother and father pray daily. And so, I know the things that they went through now. I did not know it then, but just thinking about, when I was born in 54, oh my goodness, just think about the things they went through to protect and to have a family, to thrive in that environment, to help them to believe that they could make it in those times. And so it was all built, it was their faith that brought them to that point, with the ability to give me and my siblings what we have now. So yeah, I cannot talk about my life without talking about what part, not just faith and religion, but really what God played in it. And so yes, very religious. It was a tough home to be in.
Representative Talley.
Well, I'm growing up on a farm. I'm a storyteller. So first 7 years of my life, we lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is way down at the bottom. Went into Mexico, Juarez, Mexico, every weekend. All my friends, I went to Omasilla Park Elementary, which was all Hispanic school except 3 white kids. And the other 2 white kids were my brothers. So my little brothers and sisters spoke Spanish before they spoke English. We had a nanny and my dad was in the military. We were not religious, but working in the military, you're around every flavor of person. We moved from an all Hispanic town, Las Cruces, to Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And we lived on an army base that was predominantly black. It was the beginning of the Vietnam War. All my friends on the post were black, and I didn't know that I couldn't play with them. We just played together. Well, my 4th grade year, they closed the school on the base, and we all got shipped to Whitehall Elementary School, which was a white school. And so if you watch the movie, Remember the Titans, where they had all those people rioting out in front of the school. Well, that's where I went to school like that. And we walked in the front door, me with all my black friends, and there was a water fountain, and there was a sign above it that said whites. And about 10 feet later, there was a water fountain that said colored. And so I go into class, all my friends are there, and the principal got on there and said, students, we'll have our visitors leave as soon as possible, but until our visitors leave, if you get a drink out of a water fountain not associated with your color, you'll receive 2 licks in the principal's office. Well, I didn't know what that meant, so I asked my friends, and we went and got a drink, and I had to taste the water in the other water fountain. And my 4th grade year, I got 54 licks. I'm a slow learner. My dad didn't like what he was doing in the Vietnam War. It was biological warfare, and he didn't like it. He couldn't talk about it. It was top secret. So we moved to Anadarko, Oklahoma. So I had all Hispanic friends, all black friends, and I moved to Anadarko, and all my friends were Native Americans. So when our daughter was 4 years old, we're standing in church. She pulls my jacket and she said, Dad, you know, you let every kind of kid spend the night with us because we have a guest room in our house. And so all types of kids stay with us, whoever needs a place to stay. And she said, you know, you're colorblind with your eyes, and I am, but I think you're colorblind with your heart too. And so I would say everything I do stems from being accepted and forgiveness. I would say those are the 2 big words that are, I would say, foundations of my life.
Very nice. Thank you all. Okay, now we're going to get into more of the meat of this. Kind of a section called Separation of State and Religious
Wait,
Questions.
You didn't ask Representative Turner.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I am so sorry, Representative Turner. I am so sorry.
No worries. I think my story is very similar, right? I grew up in a religious family, right? And grew up specifically in a Baptist church. I grew up singing in a Baptist choir, and was an usher for a little bit in the church. So, but one of the things that my mother and my father always instilled in me, and my grandmother, right, was being able to be authentic, right, and continuously showing up fully as yourself, and being able to explore and learn from everybody and everything. And so I think around the time that I was in 7th grade, 6th, 7th grade, maybe, was a time where I was starting to make more friends that of differing religious backgrounds. And so my mom was like, okay, go out and explore, right? Go to church, go to youth hour with other folks, and see kind of what calls to you and what doesn't, right? Because she also wanted to make sure that our religious beliefs were ours, right? Not something that they had given to us, right? But something that we took the time to research and to learn about, right? And so religion and spirituality, right, are really big parts of my upbringing and my formative years. And I think how it affects how I'm a policymaker is really big too. The thing that I love most about religion and spirituality is the act of community service, and community organizing, right? Being able to take care of our most vulnerable populations, being able to help the sick and the shut-in. And I'm very, very thankful for this space because it really is a big part of why I do the work that I do. I think one of my favorite surahs, one of my favorite verses, right? And one that I pray every day and one that helps guide me in the work that I do is Surah 2, Ayah 177. in the Quran, and it says goodness doesn't consist of, like a rough translation is like, goodness doesn't consist of the folks who turn their faces towards the east or the west, right? But the truly good are those who give away their wealth, however much they cherish it, right? To their relatives, to orphans, to the most vulnerable, to the travelers, to the less fortunate, right? Those who liberate the oppressed people, right? Those that keep their promises whenever they make them. The people who are steadfast in times of misfortune, oppression, adversity, and times of danger. These are the truly good people, and these are the people who believe in God, right? That is something that I think about every day that I do this work. That's something I think about every day that I show up and try to take care of my community in a holistic way, right? Making sure that I am thinking about, because I feel like I have faced a lot of adversity in my time, right? But I haven't experienced everything, right? And making sure that we are critically thinking about the roles that we don't get to inhabit, right? But that are still affected by the policies that we make every day. And so my religion definitely, as well as every part of my being, really, really dictates how I make policy, but in a way that allows me to critically think about identities that I'll never be able to hold, right? And helps me take care of my community in a way that I am very, very thankful for. So.
Very nice. And I'm so sorry that I forgot to call you on you at that point. I will not forget again. Next time I'll forget Representative Talley, okay? Although Article 6 of the Constitution declares that there should be no religious test of candidates to be elected to public office, the U.S. Constitution doesn't specifically call for separation of church and state. It was the founder of Rhode Island, Roger Williams, who first alluded to the essential division when he called for, quote, a wall of or hedge of separation between the, quote, wilderness of the world and, quote, the garden of the church. And he was more concerned with protecting religion from the incursions of government than the other way around. Thomas Jefferson later wrote about a, quote, wall of separation between the church and the state. And Jefferson and Madison did not want to see the government support a particular faith or force its citizens to align with a particular religious tradition. This belief is enshrined in the First Amendment, which prohibits the government from establishing a religion or violating the free exercise of religion. And yet both Jefferson and Madison, as presidents, regularly mixed religions and government, as have many other presidents since then. Given all this, what role should religion play in our political system? And I will start with Representative Turner this time.
That's a big question. And I think about it because some of the things that have happened in our legislature, I don't get the security to be able to do the same things. Like, we've literally had people, it feels like, preach at us in their debates and in their questions, right? And as a Muslim, I don't get the same vulnerability. I don't get the same range to be able to do something like that. And so I feel like wholeheartedly, I believe in the separation of church and state, meaning that we do not legislate on people's personal spiritual walks, right? On those types of things. When I think about how we had debated a bill that was essentially said that we would put in God we trust in every, or in just in as many, I guess, state buildings as possible, right? I think about these things and what that looks like. If I say, well, I mean, would we do an amendment to say in Allah we trust, right? When that's just Arabic for God, right? I think about these things continuously. And so, like I said, I wholeheartedly believe in the separation of church and state. And I believe in that merely because we do not get the opportunity to legislate on how someone worships, right? And I think if we are going to actively push out other religions outside of Christianity, then we have to create space to leave our own, or to leave Christianity out as well. I think if your religion guides how you legislate, that's a lot different than legislating on religion. And so I don't know. It's a big question, and yet again, I don't think I can stress enough why I believe in the separation of church and state. But I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Senator Young.
Yeah. That's a very interesting. It's difficult for someone who, and I will say to you, I'm was this past month was asked to come in as an interim pastor at one of the local churches. So I'm back in the role again. And so that's an interesting question. And it's been an interesting question since my beginning in the House of Representatives some 7-8 years ago. I have never tried to separate my faith being from my political being. But I also know that I cannot utilize the same functioning as a faith being in the political realm. And what Representative Turner was referring to, I've cringed both in the House and in the Senate when individuals start in some of those dialogues, usually during the debate period, and they inject their religious belief, to own a gun is a God-given right. I want to get up and just stop them right there and say, show me in the Bible. I've read the Bible 7-8 times all the way from cover. Show me in the Bible where it says that. Show me where it says that. So people elect us for who we are, for what we present to them, and I don't think many of them, I don't know, other campaigns run on the fact that they will get up and use the Bible to dictate policy. The fact is, my faith does dictate my vote. My faith does dictate what I believe, but I don't use that as a way to separate or divide me from the rest of the folk in that group. And because once you start using God as your dividing point, then you raise my shackles, and I say, well, I believe I love God as much as you do. So what makes your yes vote different from my nay vote? So it is, and I wish we could do it, but you're not going to do that. And I would also say, Representative Turner, I have had folk. I've kind of gotten to this point, asking questions, and both Representative Talley and Turner know what I'm talking about. Asking questions on the floor is because the person you ask the question to can answer the question any way they want to. They can give you an answer or give you no answer and say that's their answer. I've started hinging my stuff on debate time, where I can say just about what I want to say and get my point across concerning whatever the bill is or concerning whatever they say. But I still don't have to use religion as a sledgehammer to beat folk up with. And that's normally what happens. It's almost like I'm going to out-religion you on the Senate floor of the state of Oklahoma. And it's horrible, to be perfectly honest with you. And like I said, I cringe quite often when I hear folk reference God in the midst of something that has nothing to do with what they're talking about or their bill. And it's surely it has nothing to do with their worship experience. So I have a little problem with that. I voted against the bill that said, let's put the motto of the United States on all the county buildings and state buildings. I got a problem. With that. I believe my faith and my religion is as good as anyone else. I believe in it, but I'm not going to force other folk to have to endure something that seems to say to them that their religion is not as significant and as important as mine. I'm gonna let God sort that out in the end. So that's kind of where I stand, and I believe the founding fathers, again, they wrote the right thing, but they weren't practicing the right thing, and the whole point of it was, let's don't have a government that supports one religion, and you kind of get that right now if you're at the state capitol at 23rd and Lincoln.
Representative Talley. Thank you,
I
George.
would agree with everything they said. I agree with separation of church and state. And I didn't have that big a problem with In God We Trust putting it on. I thought it was a waste of money more than I was against that, because it is on our money. It is out there. The one that I thought a few years ago, Senator Young, was when they tried to vote and put the 10 Commandments at the state capitol. To me, that was going to use state money for a religion. So that I was totally against that. Now I didn't get to vote or anything on that, but that to me was a crossing the line of separation of church and state.
I voted no for you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Well, and the question would be whose 10 Commandments, since they differ in the Christian, Muslim, Jewish, religions. The 10 Commandments are a little bit different in each of them. So since you did bring up the legislature, all of you brought up the legislature, I will go back a few years. You probably saw the paper yesterday. Front page was Imad and Chashi was on the front page there. And of course, that takes us back to something that many of us were involved in when he was denied permission to lead the prayer at the state capitol in the legislature. And never got a reason why, but we know why he was not allowed to do it. And of course, there are many reasons why I'm so glad, Mauree, that you were elected, but that's one of them, because one of the excuses used at that time was, well, only people who are representative of their constituencies can say the prayer in the legislature. And of course, at that time, and until last year, there was no Muslim, no Jewish person of faith in the legislature. Now we have a Muslim, so there can be no excuse about Imad and Chasi or another imam saying the prayer in before the legislature. So I think it's something that was a learning process for all of us, and what was happening with that. And I know Senator Young was very involved in trying to get Imad before the legislature to give that service. And of course, now he is going to give the prayer, which is wonderful. Staying with politics for a minute, we are coming up to Saturday. Will be the first day of Passover, and as a person of Jewish faith, getting ready to celebrate Passover, of course, one of the most important things about Passover is being freed from slavery, being freed from bondage from Egypt. And it was out of that we said that Jewish people welcomed the stranger. Always the most important thing. In the Torah, the most used phrase in the Torah, 36 times, is about welcoming the stranger. We have a situation at the border, and we've had one for 5 years. We've had one in this country for a long time dealing with immigration. How do all of you feel in the issue and religion working on the issue of immigration and what should be done, especially since all of you are such people of faith? And I will start with Representative Talley on that one.
Well, since all of us in the United States, except my Native American friends, are immigrants or brought over here as slaves, we don't have a foot to stand on, to tell you the truth. We need to fix it so that we can figure out a way to help these people. But why wouldn't you want to come to the United States? And there's more food, there's less violence. There's violence, but there's less violence than in Honduras or Guatemala or some of those places. So yeah, I don't know how to do it right, but we need, I mean, this happened back in the early 1900s with from England and Ireland, the Japanese and the Chinese that helped build the railroads across the United States. I mean, this has always happened. Somebody's afraid of some color, of some skin, and we lose our ever-loving minds over something stupid. But we need to figure out a way to do it correctly, and I don't know what that is.
Michael. Michael, we can't hear you.
That would be because I was muted. Thank you,
Okay.
Senator.
Your age.
Representative Turner, could you go ahead, please?
Yeah, I think Representative Talley brings up a good point, right? The fact that not only, right, are people, America is labeled as the land of the free and the home of the brave, and it is branded as a place where you can come and be free and build a life of wealth for your friends, for your family, right? Where you can really explore and grow as a person, right? And it feels a little strange to advertise as something like that and continuously try to shut people out of that, out of trying to create a better life. And when we talk about how, and when we truly look at the fact that the America that we have today, right, and all of it, in the splendor that we have, right, and the inventions that we have, right, was built on the backs of enslaved folks, right, on the backs of immigrants. That is how we get to the wonderful America that we see today, right? And I think it's also important to note that words mean things, right, and that continuously when you see throughout history, right, it is some form of white supremacy or patriarchy that really shuts people out of being able to build a better life. And so I think it's really important to note, right, that people are coming to America to build a better life. And we should be working on a way that people can access that, right? And working on a way that we aren't continuously, if not deporting people as a whole, right, but detaining people, especially when we think about the amount of US citizens that have been detained because of skin color alone, right? When we think about those things, and we think about how ripping families apart does nothing, right, but hurt people in the end. And think about the 500 plus children that we are still working on reuniting with their families, right? And so there's no one stop shop solution to being able to fix the problems that America has caused with immigration, right? But I think it's really important to listen to the people who are directly impacted. I think that's one of the key parts of community organizing, is that we listen to the people who are directly impacted, because communities know what they need to not only survive, but to thrive. And there are phenomenal people across America, right here in Oklahoma, that are doing phenomenal work around immigration, right, around DACA, and around all of these things, right? And these communities, right, the folks who are on the ground doing that work really know. And so how we fix it is we listen, right? Because we have a lot of times we have people legislating from positions and about lifestyles, right, that they will never have to come in contact with. Quite honestly, that's why I ran for office, right? There were so many people legislating on my body and legislating on the issues that I have to deal with every day that will never have to deal with those issues, right? And so I ran because the folks of House District 88 asked me to, and because representation matters. Creating a table where our sick and our shut-in, where our most vulnerable populations, where our marginalized and disenfranchised people have voices, right, where they are heard, where they are listened to, and where those are voices and those solutions, those people-centered solutions are uplifted, is really, really important in how we do this work in a justice-centered way, in a people-centered way. So.
Senator Young.
Yes, and could I quickly go back to what you said? Emma Nchasi was that the first incident occurred in the House of Representatives. That's when I was in the House, when they would not, the person that was in charge of that would not allow him to come in to speak. He now has been approved to speak in the Senate, to lead prayer in the Senate. So I don't know if the House has changed at all. So let's clearly say that we don't know if the House has said, okay, it'd be all right for him to lead the prayer over there yet. So maybe we got two folk here.
But what we do have, Senator, though, is a Muslim in the House of Representatives in Oklahoma who can invite him to lead prayer for her. Exactly.
Let's see what reason they use for keeping him out.
Exactly. So we have that now.
Yeah. The problem down at the border stems from this. And I believe that the problem at the border that exists at the border of the United States and Mexico is because of one. Listen, we still have people in leadership who will not admit that institutional systematic racism exists in America. You had those incidents I just listed a few minutes ago. You have not heard from the governor of Oklahoma. You have not heard from the speaker of the House of Representatives, and you have not heard from the pro tem of the Senate saying anything against any of those three incidents that I just listed. At least I haven't read anywhere in the paper any quote from them saying that it was horrible, horrendous, what happened. These are the leaders. And so if you don't have them saying anything about that, you're not going to get the push you need to change the country or to move the country into the direction, or the state in the direction that the country and state needs to go. That's the big problem. We just had three, the State Department of Health Commissioner, the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, and the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority. All three of those individuals have to come through the Senate, and we have to vote on them to get their job. I asked all three of them the same question because I wanted all three of them, will you commit to dealing with the disparities that exist in minority communities? What I was, and each one of them, surprisingly enough, admitted, one, that the disparities did exist, which is more than our leadership has done. They admitted it, that they existed, and they committed to saying, yes, you're right, Senator Young. If we put some money and attention to that, it would improve the whole status of the state of Oklahoma. But we have folk in power who will not admit it. So therefore, what's happening at the border is understandable in that light, that you got people who really, those children, that is horrendous. There is no way that you would have that situation where children are separated from parents at the border, living in those conditions. And anywhere else, if it was any other children, if my children, your children, you wouldn't have it. But all of a sudden we can do that to them because we will not admit that there is institutional systematic racism and that we can get away with it as long as we possibly can. And even President Biden is having some problems moving on that issue. So we can't give him a pass on that. But I think that's the problem. We're still struggling with the same old battles that I heard someone say, and I close with this. I heard someone say during the brouhaha at the United States Capitol on January the 6th, some gentleman who was part of it said, this is just like right before the times of the Civil War. We have that mentality that exists in this nation. And until the leadership grabs hold of the problems that are real and extant in this world and in this country, we're going to continue to have children down at the border separated from families, living in cages and living in conditions that none of us would have any of our children and grandchildren or great-grandchildren living in.
How should the faith community respond to this?
Well, let me say, others can chime in. We need to be raising our voices and raising money to go down there and do something about it to change it. There are ways to change that listen, the government can do. We have facilities that are much better than cages. That, we got buses, we got transportation, we've got FEMA, we got all of those that can mobilize to move those children to places that are. And listen, I understand. I'm not living in some fantasy world that there are not people who are implanted in some of those with children who have ill will for the United States of America. I recognize that there are people who are already here in America, citizens who have ill will for America. So you're not going to stop all of that. Take care of the problem so you can weed those folk out. If you don't take care of the problem, you're never going to weed that. You're going to increase the number of folks. So I think the faith community needs to be more vocal, needs to be more vibrant about what's happening down there. And I'm part of it. I'm just as guilty as the rest of the faith community. We need to be down there looking at that situation and seeing what we can do right now instead of waiting, because that situation has gone on way, way too long. That's an impossible situation for those young people.
I might add, to me, when things don't go exactly the way you want, try to blame somebody for our problems. And they just seem to be an easy scapegoat for whatever problem you want to bring up. But I just was making a list here. I personally have never met an Hispanic person that wasn't a good worker. In fact, I can hear two Mexican guys working on our bathroom right now, remodeling it. But every roofer that I know, people in the food service, we don't eat, folks, if we don't have Hispanic people processing meat, vegetables, all kinds of stuff. We wouldn't have our lawns mowed. We wouldn't have our cars worked on, buses being driven. And I just think that a lot of times us white people want, and that's where that systemic racism, George, you're talking about. I don't think we're being honest that we need these people to help us live our lives. But if it's not going the way we want, then we're just going to blame people. That's what I was thinking.
Yes, right. And then also noting that, like, the folks that I know, right, they are right community organizers, right. They are not just folks in the service industry, right. They are community organizers. They are doctors. They are lawyers, right, too. And so I think it's also important to note that, and I can't stress it enough, right, that our liberation is tied together, right. Oftentimes we will say, or it feels like sometimes that maybe in religious places or in comfortable places, we will distance ourselves from the problem. And sometimes, and specifically, we'll distance ourselves from immigration, right? When I think just about every religion is rooted in some form of immigration, and right, we all talk about immigration, right? This is an issue that we should all really care about and that we should be continuously working on, whether or not it is a religious tie that you have to it, right? Or you are an atheist, right? Is the fact that we should be taking care of our community, right? We wouldn't want to see anybody else ripped from the arms of their parents. We wouldn't want to see anybody locked up in a cage and only given one of those silver safety blankets to stay warm at night, right? Sleeping on concrete slabs. Living conditions in these facilities are absolutely atrocious and really mimic what it looks like in some of our prisons across the nation, right? These are some of the most unsanitary places, right? And so busing people down there, right, to be able to provide sanitary hygiene products, living conditions, right, to highlight the fact that this is really, sometimes people are running to be able to form a better life, right? And we lock them in facilities in America and we rip them from the hands of their parents and we say, you don't deserve a better shot at life because you didn't go through this, I don't know, X amount of year process and you didn't spend X amount of thousands of dollars to be able to afford this life that I was given because my parents or my great grandparents immigrated a long time ago. So I didn't have to deal with it, right? The things that we hate about people are often the things that we don't look at in ourselves. Right. And so I don't know. I don't want to get too worked up about it, but there are a lot of issues, I think, with immigration that a lot of folks are trying to turn a blind eye to that I think is more detrimental than people really think.
Okay, I just got the word that we have to wrap this up now. And so I'm going to ask each of you to do something, especially for two ministers, which it's almost impossible to do, but I'm going to ask you to do it. And that is to be short with this last answer, okay? One of the goals of interfaith dialogue is to make room for holy envy. This means recognizing that we can learn important lessons from other faith traditions without needing to be disloyal in any way to our own faith. In closing, have you experienced any moments of holy envy during our discussion this evening? What have you learned from your colleagues who came from other faith traditions? It's got to be quick. George, go first.
Thank you. Yes, Hope. I'm so excited about listening to Representative Turner and Representative Talley. Both of them have given me hope by listening to them and listening to their perspective. It has engendered me to believe that I may be old and tired, but I can keep on fighting because there is hope. So I thank both of them for what they said tonight that gave me some measure of hope in tomorrow.
Representative Talley?
I would say that we had a professor here at OSU that went every Friday and prayed at the mosque here in Stillwater. And I've been there many times. And I would say I try to pray a lot, but their respect for the institution of prayer pushes me to be better.
Representative Turner?
Yeah, I think, like I said, that was one of the things that my mom and my dad really instilled in me at a young age, right? Was to be able to continuously learn and grow from other faiths. And so that was one of the first things I did when I joined the house. Was I sent Joel an email. We talked about Ash Wednesday, and I let him know, right, about a plethora of other religions and faiths that were or religious holidays that were coming up. And so we are in the works on some things, and we're able to talk about Purim, and hopefully, I think this Thursday, if you're tuned in, there might be something special for the kind of sermon that we get. And I think also we're working on something for Ramadan too. So being able to, and the Holy Festival and all of these things, right? And so we are continuously trying to, or I, right, specifically am continuously trying to make sure that we are being as inclusive as possible in the Oklahoma House of Representatives in whichever way, right?
Great. Thank you all very much for this very enlightening panel discussion tonight. I wish we had 2 hours. There are so many more things that we could have talked about tonight, but thank you all for being with us tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
See you guys at work.
Yes.